Welcome everyone to our live Q&A with Valerie Shepard, and I'm going to hand it over right away so that she can tell us about being an electrical engineer.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for having me here. It's my pleasure. I'm really happy, a little bit nervous, and I hope that I can show a little bit about the path that it took to my current position as an electrical engineer in Canada, because I think if you watched the previous video, you know that I was not born here. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk a little bit about coming out a trans woman at work as well, because that was a huge challenge that I had to overcome. Should I just start the presentation, Trina?
I think I need to give you permission. Sorry about that. You should be able to now.
All right. Okay, so yeah, so this is the story of my career. So and let me know if you have any questions. So a little bit about me. I'm 36 years old, and I'm a transgender woman. I love drawing. This is something that I've done my whole life. Video games, of course, tabletop role-playing games, and then I'm a vegan. I graduated in electrical engineering in 2013 with an emphasis in electrical power systems. I had a few positions ever since I started. I started a career before graduating in 2008 in industrial boat sales. And then 4 years after that, after I had already started school, I started working as a substation designer. Once I immigrated to Canada, I worked as a project engineer. And then as my current role nowadays, as the electrical plant engineer for the Holyrood plant. There are a few skills that I think are very important for a career in engineering. And I think the biggest ones that I can mention is to being results oriented, which means being able to see what you need to achieve and then define the path of how you're going to achieve that goal. Problem solving, which is very much results, it matches with the first one, which is when you have a problem, how you get it solved. I know it's very abstract, but it's something that if you can think about constantly through these lenses, they're gonna be skills that are really important, as important as knowing math and physics. And of course, coding. I think nowadays being able to code will give you the tools in any field of engineering, in any field of STEM, for you to get ideas out of your head and put them into practice. And it will really push you forward, will really give you an edge into, because nowadays everything is digital, even the very big systems that you're going to see that I deal with on my day-to-day basis. So I'm going to start talking about how it was before I immigrated. So I was born in a very transphobic third world country. And when I was a teenager, I realized that for me to be happy, I had to leave that country. And a career in engineering would make it very possible because it is a very marketable career. It is a career that is always in demand most of the time. And I married a wonderful person who helped me achieve that goal. I would not have made it without them. So why did I choose engineering? First of all, with my goal to leave the country, it was always said anytime they were looking into immigration or we have job fairs or anything like this, they always say Canada is looking for more engineers. And with the immigration mindset in mind, engineering is applicable everywhere, no matter the country. Laws might change from place to place, rules might change from place to place, but physics is physics. You know, you're going to have different standards depending on the regulations that you have in your country, but amps are amps, kilograms are kilograms. So if you learn something for engineering in a country, you will be able to apply that knowledge elsewhere. In high school, I really liked physics and math, and I did really well in physics, but I struggled with math. I was always a C, B minus student in math, but even then, that was not a barrier for me to join engineering career. Like with effort, you can overcome any struggle that you think you have in a certain area. And as I was still in the closet, I thought I was already used to navigate the boys club culture. It was everywhere. There was no escaping it. So why electrical engineering? To be very honest, I really liked music when I was a teenager, and I was a pure musician. I was not good at it. So because I wanted to be around music, I decided to go towards electronics. So as soon as I finished it, I started a diploma course in electronics. And soon after, I started working at a major motor manufacturer. The name was WAG, W-E-G. It's one of the world's most biggest motor manufacturers. And it showed me a side of electrical engineering I was not familiar with. At the same time, when I went to work, I went by a substation, which is where when you walk around and you look in your surroundings, usually have all those power cables concentrating in a substation. And I could hear the buzzing of electricity, and that made me feel really curious. The way the equipment looked, I really felt attached to it for some reason. This is a transformer, and this is the core of the substation. And every day as I passed and I looked into it and I heard the buzz, I actually looked for a recording of the buzz to show you folks, but I couldn't actually quite get it. But it's very interesting, it's very unique. And it enticed my curiosity to know how it worked. And I really felt like I wanted to work with it. So as I was going through the beginning of my career, I read in an article that in the power systems field, more people were retiring than graduating. And I always thought of job security as one of the main drivers of my career choice. So I thought to myself that if there's more people living than entering the field, I would be highly employable. And power systems is not a niche market. Anywhere, no matter how little the city, no matter how small a town, you will require power. And in this field, the technologies are somehow established. One thing that sometimes made me feel challenged was how, for example, in electronics or computer engineering, new things are coming all the time. You have to be updating yourself all the time. Whereas in power system, it's not that you don't have to, but it is a robust field with over 100 years of history. So the technologies are pretty much established. A generator will be a generator. However you control it, you're still going to talking about copper and iron and windings. So it is something that you can get really good at and keep yourself really good at. So I started engineering school, but because I was already working, I used to work full time, I went to school night shift, which is something that the biggest cities in Brazil were common for having. I used to work from 5:30 p.m. I used to go to school, from 5:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. And then, yes, it would be going home, eating and crashing in bed and waking up 7:30 the next day to go to work. It was very challenging. Meanwhile, my partner was doing the same thing. They worked full time and went to education school at night. And together we saved and prepared as much as we could with the goal of coming to Canada. I graduated in 2013. And by then I had been working for 4 years as a substation designer. I was already working with the transformers that had enticed me before. So I was in a position of a lot of privilege. My father paid for my education. I didn't pay for it myself. I was in the closet, so I navigated in the education and working world, passing as a man. It was difficult, but it did allow me to hide and evade certain challenges. And I was white in a country whose majority is made of people of color. So that alone set me apart and removed challenges from my way that other people of color would have to face, like discrimination, racism, etc. So eventually I made it to Canada. My partner and I, we saved for 10 years and roughly 50 to 70% of our income, side jobs, and we met the threshold that we needed to be able to come to Canada, that the government demands that immigrants come and show, which for us was roughly $65,000. It was not little. If the exchange rate was then what it is today, the exchange rate almost doubled, we would not have met the requirement. And my spouse, they came for a master in linguistics, and that would allow me to work on an open work permit. And then, did I say before that Canada wants engineers? It's not quite like that. Because engineering is a regulated profession in Canada. So Canada wants engineers who can work as an engineer. So it was, to be able to work as an engineer is a whole other challenge. I don't know if you ever saw on the news when they say that some people are doctors and engineers and they're driving cabs. Not that it's in any way demeaning, but those people with degrees that could work on their fields can't because of the regulations in place that are there to make sure that people who are graduated elsewhere in the world have the same competency as the same skills as an engineer trained in Canada. So I had to write 4 very, very difficult confirmatory exams: power systems, electric circuits, engineering economics, and a 4th one. I just don't remember. So, and each exam included paying a fee of $250. It was not cheap either. And on top of all that, I also needed 1 year of engineering experience in Canada to get my Canadian registration. So in my first years after I immigrated here, I started working outside of my field. I started working as a project manager in construction. That allowed me to at least get something engineering related experience, enough to satisfy PANL and be able to get that 1 year requirement. So we arrived in Canada in May 2015, and it was only February 2017 that I got my PNG registration. And even then, even with the PNG, the law was such that if things were as they were, I would have to have them back to Brazil, or my partner would have to have kept studying for us to be able to stay in Canada. But luckily, after the 2015 election, the Canadian government changed immigration rules to make it easier for people who were already in Canada and registered and working and spoke the language to stay. So in November 2017, my partner and I became permanent residents, which was a huge victory for us. But on top of all that, I am a trans woman, and it brought its own challenges, very strong challenges. Because throughout my life, I thought coming out would be impossible. My country of origin is extremely transphobic, extremely. It is a country in the world that murders the most trans women in a year. Not even like very conservative countries do it as much as when I came from. And of course, my family of origin had the same transphobic mindset. And I thought that I was used to the boys club culture, but in engineering and working in engineering in Brazil was extremely toxic. It was the average boys club culture 10 times worse. And sexism, racism, and all of the forms of discrimination were rampant. And by the time that I was choosing my career, there were only 2 viable options for trans women. It was either sex work, or a very few lucky ones would be hairdressers. And again, those are not demeaning professions, but that's not what I wanted for me. And even in coming to Canada, I thought it would be impossible. But the culture here was very different. For example, the boys club culture was several orders of magnitude smaller than what I had experimented. I remember being able to have conversation with people without feeling like I had to pretend all the time that I was interested in the same things that they were. And there were many women in the workplaces that I was employed at. Men were still the majority, like they still are, but women were not seen as second class. There were women in decision positions. I worked having a woman as a supervisor for the first 2.5 years here, and was a very good relationship. And then in 2018, I joined Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, where I worked 5 days, finally returning to the field that I love, which is power systems. So from the get-go, I noticed many diversity and inclusion initiatives. At inclusive workplace posters all over the place. We had Pink Shirt Day. We had a lot of support for diversity and inclusion. We had a huge program called Bring Your Whole Self to Work. So people would not hide who they were. People would not try to fit in. People would actually try to be themselves at work. There were a lot of campaigns every day, many times a year, to fight mental health stigma. And finally, pride flag ceremonies and rainbow benches. Every year, once a year, there was what they call Diversity and Inclusion Week. And these weeks had a theme. In 2019, the theme of Diversity and Inclusion Week was trans allyship. And it was there that NL Hydro made public their policy that bathroom use was going to be according to gender and not according to biological sex. And that blew my mind, because up to that point, I thought that all the inclusion initiatives were meant for gay women and men, not necessarily transgender people. But on 2019, they showed that transgender people were included in their diversity and inclusion policies. So I felt like I would not lose my job. I felt like I would have the support if I faced prejudice. So on June 9th, 2020, I came out to my spouse, and a few months later to my friends, then to my family, despite their awful reaction. And then there was only work left. So in November 2020, I came out of work, and I thought it was going to be, I was so scared. But I got pouring support from most people in management. Everyone else, from the CEO to my immediate boss, they all called me and offered the support. It was more than I could have expected. They actually, at the plant, they flew the trans pride flag. And unfortunately, I was on vacations when they did that, and I was hoping to come back and take a picture with it, but the wind destroyed the flag. I don't know if you guys ever been around Holyrood. It's very windy. The flag didn't survive. And upon my return, it was amazing. 90% of people just pretend nothing had happened. They just called me by my names, by my pronouns, treated me normally. And those 10% who didn't pretend that nothing happened, they came me to show support and appreciation and say how happy they were. It was really, really incredible. So here are a few pictures of me. That's on Pride Month 2021 with the Pride flag there at the back. And this is me with my name and pronouns on my hard hat in front of a generator being disassembled. So I came out, but only after I established myself in a place of privilege. I was in a safe and socially advanced country, which most countries, even in the southern border, we see how awful things are for trans people there. I was in a trans-friendly company, which made things so much easier. I didn't have to educate management on a lot of things. I was a permanent employee, and I was a high performer. For the 3 years that I had been in the company, my performance reviews had been exceeded expectations in a row. And I think that's the biggest one. I was no one service provider. I didn't have clients. I was in a company and in a position where all the vendors were providing a service to us. So if they had any kind of prejudice, if they were bigoted towards me, they would lose business. So if anyone was against me, they had to shut. And I am cis-looking. That helps a lot to just slide under people's radars and facilitate acceptance. And the vast majority of trans people don't have this option. Trans people should not have to wait to be secure like I was to be able to come out. I was only able to take that step when I realized that my future, my family, my position in Canada would not be in jeopardy. And trans people should not have to conform to cisgender beauty standards to be respected. So the biggest obstacle that I see for trans people at work are actually their families, because people may be ready to accept a coworker as trans, but they have to be ready to accept their children, their siblings, and even their parents, because a lot of us still don't feel safe to come out, us millennials and older millennials and even boomers. And the biggest thing is that a supporting family will allow a transgender person to transition before they reach the job market. So if everything goes well, there's not a single trans person that I know that realized they were trans when they were 30, 40 years old. They knew from a very early age to just have to hold it in. So with the right support structure around, a person wouldn't have to transition in the workplace. So, and now this is me nowadays, out as a plant engineer, doing something that I love. So I work at the Holyrood generating station, which is a thermal generating station. It burns oil, unfortunately, it's very polluting, but the way that non-renewables work, they allow you to just burn whatever you need to burn whenever you need it. Renewables still have a problem, what we call storage issues, where you cannot stock solar, you cannot stock wind, water requires extensive dams. So because you really need to provide energy security, you still need the polluting stations, and Holyrood is one of them. I am responsible for all of the electrical equipment in the plant, not only the generators, but motors, actuated valves, control system, transformers, anything that is pretty much mainly electrical. The Holyrood station has 3 generators that supply 500 megawatts of power. and that amounts to roughly 40% of the island's peak demand. And I must make sure, with the help of the skilled trades, which means the instrumentation technicians and the electricians, that everything is in running order. And this involves knowledge of many different systems: industrial, controls, power generation, power quality. So all the previous jobs that led me to this place helped me with my day-to-day nowadays. This is a picture of, it's hard to take the 3 generators. You can see unit 3 to the left and unit 2 to the right. They weren't going from service at the time I took this picture. And this is the transformer that I used to always be looking at when in the beginning of my career, wanted to work with that. Well, there are big, 3 big ones of them, and several smaller others at the plant now. So as I said at the beginning, being results focused is really important, because especially NL Hydro is a crown corporation. So we have a lot of laws that we have in place to make sure that the ratepayer and the taxpayer are always kept first in our mind when we make decisions. So there's a lot of paperwork we have to go through. And if you don't know how to navigate that paperwork, that prevents you from being agile. So a very good skill is to know the paperwork hurdles, the hoops you have to jump through, and how you can reach the result that you need to achieve. And that involves sometimes jiggling, finding loopholes, finding the best way, knowing the people to talk. So there is an abstract component to this that is not just logical thinking and math. And you need to be as much proactive as reactive, because things break and you need to get them fixed really quick. And things may break. So you have to always be anticipating and acting to prevent things from breaking. So we are always thinking, what is the worst case scenario that can happen, and how can I prevent it? And at the same time, trying to do it with as little money as possible, because you all, I imagine you're all familiar with how costly electricity is, and we don't want the price to rise. So as much as we can provide an effective service at the least possible cost, that is the essence of engineering. And above everything, safety. Everyone goes home unharmed. It already happened at the plant that we chose not to produce energy because we felt that it wasn't safe. So we first took care of safety, and then we took care of production. And finally, in my environment, interacting with other disciplines is fundamental. We have boilers, we have steam, we have oil, and mechanical engineers take care of all of that. And the purpose of it all is to spin the electrical equipment that will provide the power. So there's a constant interaction between the many disciplines of engineering and the power plant. So now I am everything I've ever dreamed of. I am Canadian, and I'm a Canadian citizen. I am a utility engineer, like I want to have been. I'm happily married, and I'm a woman. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions. Feel free to ask anything. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Valerie. That was a great presentation. I love the initial connection you made. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear. It's just the phone slid out of my ears. So I'm just putting the Wi-Fi. Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was wondering, you talked about liking music, but not really being into it, or not, being successful at it, I guess. Personally, do you think that there's did you make the jump between music and electronics because of the kind of connections it is, where music is a lot of patterns and electronics is a lot of patterns, or?
When I went to electronics, I was thinking more of working as a sound engineer. So when you work with music, you have pedals, you have synthesizers, all those electronic instruments that you can kind of do it yourself, and or sometimes when you're recording in a studio, you have mixing equipment, bands. That was like my big dream when I was a teenager. It was to be able to become a band sound engineer and travel with them and make sure that their acoustics and everything were ready to go. And that's why I went to electronics.
Great. I love it. how many types of engineers are out there. It's unreal actually. When I start looking into like what is engineering, it's so much. Like I'm pretty sure there has to be just engineers in basically every sector.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even in sectors you don't think there are, healthcare, property management, banks even.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got questions flowing in already. So let's get to some of the student questions. The first one was, what would you say your favorite part of your job is?
It's me. Sorry. My throat went dry. I'm going to get a glass of water.
Yes, go for it.
Can you get a glass of water, please? Thank you. I'm sorry, my throat went completely dry.
You've been talking for a while. Yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, it was let me scroll. What your favorite part of your job is?
So what I like the most, Nicola, is when we have to do troubleshooting. I absolutely love troubleshooting. It's usually a bit tense. It doesn't happen all the time. But when something fails and you need to get back working really quickly, that's really nice. I also love when we do what we call predictive maintenance. We take equipment out of service and we run a battery of tests. Then we look at the results of this test and we try to predict whether equipment is about to fail or it can go back in service. I find this exercise really interesting. And it's something that I took the initiative to bring to clients. They didn't have a predictive maintenance program before I joined. So it was, I realize, especially when we can catch something that's about to happen, we can say we prevented that failure from happening.
Before I forget, a lot of the students, I'm sure, are waiting for a gamification code. So you get codes for also asking questions, but this is the code for just watching the video, either live or recorded. So you can plug that in for your gamification codes. It's Plant Engineer, which is Valerie's job title, of course. And that is all one word for the gamification. It's not really one word, it's of course. So next up, what is the work-life balance in your career?
I really enjoy the work-life balance now that I am in the plant. Before, when I was a project engineer, I was going all over the province in the middle of nowhere in a hydrogen generating station. So work-life balance there was more tricky. But here at the plant, which is close to St. John's where I live, we can get a very good work-life balance. But because we take care of an asset like a structure that is so important to generate power for the province, we have to be ready to go on a moment's notice. So it's not often that it happens, but there were times that it was the middle of a Saturday and I was just enjoying my day. And then out of the blue, I had to run to the plant because something had happened and we needed to address it. So overall, it's a good work-life balance. I don't travel out. I'm not out in the field too much because I can get back from my house to the plant and back in a day. But things can get like super complicated really quickly. And when that happens, there is no weekends, there's no resting hours or anything like this. But of course, management just does take into consideration, and you will be able to rest. You'll be able to have moments to take a breather, especially because an overworked staff is an unsafe staff, and safety is always priority.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've talked a little bit about safety throughout, especially in the Skilled Trades Month. Do you also, I'm going off the student questions for a second, but do you have to do safety certifications regularly?
Very much so, several.
Okay. keep losing my place in that thing. What subjects do you need to take in school to become an electrical engineer? And of course, you've had a different experience than these students, but maybe what courses you'd recommend at the high school level, and then if you.
Yeah. So in my country, high school has a fixed structure. We don't pick subjects. We have to do all of them. So we have math, physics, chemistry, language, science, history, geography. We do them all. And we don't pick and choose. And when it's time to go to university, there is an exam that we have to write. And that exam, we tell us, and depending on our course of program, it would tell us which subjects will be the exams we will write. So, of course, I would recommend math and physics and chemistry, of course. If you do intend to go to something more towards the math school and you intend to do engineering as your undergrad, something like biology would be good as well. And absolutely, if it is available in high schools here and you can do something in coding, I will highly recommend that you learn how to code as many languages as you can.
We'll actually be doing some coding next month as a FYI to all the students listening out there. We're definitely going to tackle some more coding, and we've done a little bit before. Certainly something that we're always going to circle back to, because again, like coding is in so many careers these days. I've even used it just doing program coordination. So no matter what you're doing, maybe just dip your toes into coding. And like
yes,
I said,
absolutely.
We'll be doing a bit of that next month and onwards. You did just say about kind of rolling off the school, and you said through your presentation that you had to kind of recertify when you arrived in Canada. Do you know if there's any international certifications for electrical engineers? Like if these students who obviously are in Canada wanted to travel abroad, would they have to recertify in other countries, or is there any such thing?
No, they would. The Canada and the US, they share a common agreement. And there is an international accreditation program that has, I think, some 50 countries in the world that are signatories to this program. And I think people coming from these countries wouldn't have to go through what I went through. Brazil was not one of them. And I think the Philippines, the UK, of course, some European countries. So, yeah, you would be able to have your certification. I don't know if you'll be able to jump straight ahead and work. There might be other hoops you would have to jump through. But at least as far as writing exams, there are countries in the world you wouldn't need to do that.
Good to know. Yeah, I was just super curious about that. So the next student question here is what your least favorite part of your job is. What could you do without?
Paperwork, absolutely. Writing reports. It comes to a point, unfortunately, that we engineers and technicians, we have to convince bureaucrats sitting in an office, not at a plant, that something that broke needs repairing. So that part of the work, the amount of regulations, paperwork that we have to go through, it's highly ineffective and it's baffling my list. I didn't go to engineering school to be filing reports to convince accountants that the cost code of a certain failure at the plant is indeed a failure, So yeah, that's definitely the worst part. But it's something you have to deal with. There's nowhere you'll go that will have no paperwork.
Yeah, I think most people might respond that way for sure in a lot of careers, really. Maybe
Absolutely.
Besides the ones that actually went to school for that, because I'm sure there are people who enjoy the control over it. So the next question up is what the hardest part of coming to Canada was.
I think definitely was gathering the money required, because we didn't have any family here. We didn't have any family support on the finance side to come to Canada. And the government demands that you can show that for your duration of your studies here, you will be able to support yourself without working. So that's why my partner's program was a 3-year program, and we have to show that we had roughly $20,000 a year to support the both of us without working. So we have to have that money first. And it took us 10 years to save that amount of money, and saving a very large portion of our income. That wasn't easy at all. Many times I thought of giving up. Many times.
Yeah, that does sound rough. You had to have decided pretty early on that immigrating was the plan to, I mean, if you were 10 years into it and such, like that's an early commitment.
It is. As I said, like, it was when I was a teenager that I realized that I really wanted to get out of the country. And when I met my partner, we were the similar mindset. And we were actually thought, okay, do we have children or do we immigrate? And we decided with immigration, and we don't regret the choice.
Oh, that's a big choice.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another student question. Is becoming an engineer worth all of the studying and hard work? How long is the average work day?
It is worth it, yes. The average work day is roughly 8 hours. Can be longer depending on what's going on, but normally 8-hour days. And yes, it is worth going through it, because especially in my field with power systems, I'm highly employable. If I needed to move elsewhere in the country, I wouldn't be worried about there being a job for me. The pay is good, the benefits are good, and it's worth it. Like, as I said, like, I love drawing, and I honestly thought about making that a career, but I realized that I might end up making a career out of a passion, and then might turn the thing that I love into a job, and you don't always love your job. Like, even I can say, like, I love my job nowadays. There are parts where, the job will drive you crazy no matter what you do. And you want your hobby to be something that you go to relax. And it's always going to be about relaxation. It's not going to be about making ends meet. It's not going to be about, will I have something to eat tomorrow? Will I be able to employ myself? So yes, it's definitely worth it. There were several times that I thought to myself of giving up. I personally think that engineering schools could be made way more efficient, way more learning oriented instead of research oriented. But those are personal opinions. Unfortunately, there are hoops that have to jump through, and if you learn how to jump through them, you will find a rewarding career on the other side. Absolutely.
Awesome. And a student wants to know, what would you do if you were not an electrician?
I assume you mean electrical engineer?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, sorry, I just read it out, but I was like, wait, electrical engineer.
Yes. I would definitely go to computer science or computer engineering, because one other aspect that I loved during engineering school was the coding, and there is a particular area of computer science that's called digital signal processing, where you pretty much you have an idea, and then you're going to go and make that idea happen by simply bringing it to life with the proper hardware and the proper programming. We can make the most crazy things happen. And that was a really interesting career path. I seriously consider it. So if I hadn't gone towards power systems and being an electrical engineer on that front, I would go to computer science, computer engineering.
Awesome. Well, we've reached the end for now of the student questions. No, I'm lying. There's a new one already. But just a flag for any of the students out there that want to ask questions, then pop them into the chat. And I believe I've sent everyone their points so far. So if you've asked a question but haven't received the points for it, pop me a message at some point and I'll send them out. But the next student question is being an electrical engineer interesting? Do you continue to learn afterwards, after you've actually become it? Do you have to go back and do any more courses or updating?
Yeah, so actually, with any engineering in Newfoundland, we're required to do 90 hours a year of professional development. And that comes from Paganel, the body that regulates engineering. 50 of those come from your regular work day to day. So every certain number of hours that you work counts for professional development. But you still need to have 40 every single year to make sure that you're always learning. So yes, you're mandated to continue learning, but even if it wasn't mandating, you still do it on your own. And even though I said in the presentation that the technologies in my field are most established, there are always new things coming up. The difference is that they come up at a pace that you can't keep up with, where other fields sometimes you just feel overwhelmed with the amount of news that happens from year to year. So yes, it is very interesting. And I find electricity is such an abstract concept, but at the same time, it is so almost magical because you get things moving out of nowhere. So when you see that bulk structure of iron and copper spinning and staying in place and generating thousands and thousands of amps of electricity, and that's going out and feeding the province, it's very nice. It's very, very nice. Very interesting.
The student says that's awesome. I just want to clarify if I don't know if you could, there's a couple times, I'm not sure, maybe it's just typos, but the students have said electrician, but I'm imagining you probably work with industrial electricians. We covered those back in Skilled Trades Month as well. So if there's students out there kind of interested in being an electrician, certainly go back to the archives and review those videos. But can you kind of break down for us what the difference is between yourself as a plant engineer and the industrial electricians?
Absolutely. So as a plant engineer, I am first what you call the single point accountable, which means ultimately I'm responsible for the electrical equipment. And I will know in the engineering education, about the physical concepts behind the equipment, how the equipment is made, how the equipment is supposed to work and can be driven to failure, how to avoid a failure. So you have the higher abstract concept of how things work, whereas the electricians, they will only go so far on the abstract concept, but they will know how to make sure that windings are properly soldered, the correct term is braced, but how windings are properly braced to make sure that they can take all that current and not just melt away. They will know how to torque the wrenches. They will know how to connect things in the field, take proper measurements. So one thing that's very common in the day-to-day is that I will have a list of what we call preventative maintenance checks. The electricians will go out to the plant and they would those measurements, they'll make those checks, and those sheets come back to me. And then I look at them, I look at the results, I interpret them, and I develop a program to make sure that whatever is going wrong or whatever can go better will get implemented. And once I get the program in place, it goes back to the electricians and they go to the field and implement it. So even though we are in the field and even though we can get our hands dirty, that's 5% of the time. The electricians are the ones hands-on on the field 95% of the time.
Right. Perfect. Thanks for that clarification. And we are in our kind of last 10 minutes. So again, anyone with questions, pop them in. But let's see. I liked in your presentation kind of you talked a lot about coming from a place of privilege and after establishing yourself in X, Y, and Z. And I guess I wanted to draw attention to of course, your choices were big, for lack of a better word, and obvious in a lot of ways. But in terms of the students now, maybe I guess I wanted to draw attention to the choices that they're making and will need to make as they decide on their career. And I guess I wanted to ask what kind of things you would look out for, or give them advice to think about when thinking about careers, whether it's like the labor market. You talked about, Canada's always hiring, or we've talked a little bit about the work-life balance. Does anything come to mind for like, this is how to choose your career, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so I think that making such huge choice so early in life, is not easy at all. I was lucky in the sense that I managed to make a choice and ended up being happy about it. But I think that the things that you have to look out to choose a career are mainly, of course, the things you like, the things you're interested in, the things that pique your curiosity, the things you see yourself doing, even if you eventually grew to find them boring. And that's what I had for myself when I was like in my late teens. I think employability is really important because it gives you the biggest peace of mind. When you go to work thinking that you can lose your job at any time, that's not a good feeling. That's not a good feeling at all. That adds to anxiety, that compromises mental health. And at the same time, when you can see the economy go through ups and downs and busts and booms and know that your career is safe, that your job feels mostly immune to it, you know that you're going to feel good. Like you're going to be, wow, look at what I escaped. Look at the peace of mind that I have. And peace of mind goes a long way. And also I'll try to look at it with some ingenuous eyes or innocent eyes, in the sense that, what is new? How can I have fun with this? Unfortunately, fun and work not always go hand in hand. And work will always be challenging, even if you do something that you really, really enjoy. But if you can find something that will keep you employable, that will give you enough peace of mind and a good salary, or that you could do as a business, those are all always good choices. I would recommend against the thing you love the absolute most. Make sure that thing will always be your escape. That's going to be the thing you're going to do to relax. Because if you turn into a business, or if you make that your job, you won't be able to relax while doing it if that's your livelihood depends on it. There are good moments, there are bad moments, and it's always good to have something to fall back on. So a career in STEM, I think it's a wide enough field that you can find something like something that's employable, something that pays well, and at the same time, something that will make you feel rewarded, make you feel proud of yourself as well. It was very abstract. I hope I made myself clear.
Oh, I love it. I love the end note there. Choose something that'll make yourself proud, always. So that's great advice right there. And so we've got time for just a couple more questions. Most recent student question there. We've covered a little bit, but I'll read it out. Have you been interested in plant engineering since you were very young? And when and how did you decide you wanted to pursue that career?
So I've always liked how things work. So I wasn't interested in engineering itself ever since I was young, but I really like those shows. I think here in Canada, I was like Bill Nye Science Guy. I don't know if you had Bigman World up in here, but I always watched, and I grew up watching the onset of Discovery Channel when it was pretty much about science and not about ghost hunters, So they had things about how they would go into factories, they would go show space travel, they would show biology and medicine. So I always felt interest in I would say more scientific things ever since I was young, yes. And I decided that I wanted to be not necessarily a plant engineer, but what I would call a utility engineer, which means I would work in making power. And I realized that I wanted to be a utility engineer, I would say halfway through school. As I said, at first I went to do a diploma course in electronics, thinking that I was going to be a sound engineer for a band. And that made me work for a motor manufacturer who was very industrial. And that made me take certain courses in school. And in seeing those courses and in interacting with certain professors, I realized that I really liked this part of power generation. And honestly, it was as a huge component of luck to it, because a bad professor could have just sent me away from this field, thinking that I would really not want to work with it. And it actually happened. I had a professor, my first professor on electrical machines. Oh my God, he was really bad. He was really bad. He was really entitled. And I told myself, I'm never ever working with a motor in my life. And that was his job, working with motors. So as it happened, I had to take a job. So I took a job, the first one that I was able to get. And I really enjoyed it. And I like working with motors because I was seeing it from a different perspective. So just to answer the questions, I think it was roughly 24 years old when I realized that power system is what I wanted. And I was halfway through school. I didn't go to school knowing exactly what I wanted. It's a very big choice, and you're going to be going tangentially. You're going to go towards a direction and realize you want to change. And then eventually those training course, they start getting reduced and you find the direction that you want to go.
Yeah, and in engineering in particular, at least at MUN, you start, your first year is called Engineering 1. And that is like the base of all engineering programs at Memorial. So then you really get the feel for like what is possible. If you're right now thinking like engineering is for me, don't feel like you necessarily have to decide like which type of engineering, because like we said, there are so many, but you can decide that after or during your first year.
Yes, and even in electrical engineering itself, you can go through power systems, industrial systems, telecommunications, electronics, computer engineering. This is only electrical. You still have mechanical with this many branches, chemical with this many branches.
Well, with that, we're at the last 2 minutes, and I've saved this student question for now, for the last one, because I always love to end on what advice would you give youth today? And or is there anything that we wanted to touch on that we just didn't get a chance to?
I think the advice that I would give, and I think by what I read online, people in Gen Z or younger millennials still struggle with, is called imposter syndrome, where you feel like you're not qualified for the job you're about to do, and you feel like you can't do it. My advice is fight it. Yes, you are. When I first started my job as a designer and I had to make sure that a substation wouldn't simply explode with the connections that I was telling the people in the field to make, I had to pretty much look at it. I felt like, oh my God, I can't do that. But you take a deep breath and you do it anyway, and you avail of the support network that you have with your supervisors, with your bosses, with books and literature, and go ahead and do it, because no one knows how to do things off the bat. They learn, and of course, you cannot make gigantic mistakes, but learning through mistakes is a path, so go ahead, especially early in your career, make mistakes and ask the most stupid questions. Don't be afraid to ask, because when you're starting, people expect you to ask questions that you think will get you fired. No, they don't. We, especially us now, they're getting more on the management level, we love seeing young engineers that come and are ready to bash their heads and ask any questions they feel like asking, as stupid as they may be, because that will show initiative, that shows proactiveness, and that shows an eagerness to learn, and shows that the person's not afraid of, just putting themselves out there and make themselves look bad, which they don't, So don't listen to imposter syndrome. ask stupid questions, and make as many mistakes as you can make in a controlled environment, because it's through mistakes that you will eventually learn.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much, Valerie, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. And just reading the comments here, thank you so much. So nice
You're
learning
welcome.
about this. And I did just want to shout out within the clubhouse there now, I did just put the link to a recorded video that Valerie did with her coworkers last summer for us. So that was behind the scenes NL Hydro's Holyrood Thermal Generating Station. So check that out. The link is there in the clubhouse chat. So you'll get to see where Valerie works, and we'll see everyone. Hopefully you'll join us again next week for the Robo Gals, doing more of this book, and then the week after for Jillian Burrow, who is a computer engineer. So that's what's coming up the next couple weeks. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Valerie. And everyone have an amazing week.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Bye.